from you. So we just want to thank you guys for letting us come in and learn as you guys are growing your system. You definitely give us a perspective that we don't get everywhere, especially being in a private school. We get to kind of connect with a different group and a different philosophy around how you do your things, and I personally appreciate that. So thank you so much for letting us partner with you in that work. Group expectations, told you we'd get there. So we want to make sure that we're all paying attention to the response signal. I'm secondary. I'm horrible at attention signals because I was secondary. I just would be like, hey, hey, and they'd go, hey, hey. You know, so we did fun things like that. Sometimes we would use songs. I would use a lyric. They would respond with the lyric. The attention signal that is preferred by all of our people is we do a high five and we say thank you for coming back, and we count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So if you guys can come back by the time we're at a 0, that's fantastic. We know that this is a fun, exciting time. You're going back to school. Some of you are like, what are you calling fun? But we know that this is a really exciting time for you guys to be together. We're going to try and give you meaningful content today, so the more we can get you back together when we come to the end of an activity, the quicker we'll get through it. Maybe you'll get some time away from us. So the big thing is just make sure you're respectful and responsible. Respectful, honor your colleagues when they're speaking, and if we're trying to get you back, just if you can try to come back with us. I know sometimes it's challenging. That'd be great. Taking care of your own needs. Make sure if you need to go potty, you get up and go. I do have 2 10-minute breaks scheduled this morning, so we're going to go through a chunk of content, give you a break, go through a chunk of content, give you a break. Want to make sure that it's, doable. We know you've got emails, you've got things you're thinking of, so we'll give you those 10 minutes to go out and do those things and handle it. And in that time, if you do have questions or if you want to chat with us, we're here. We're not going anywhere, so we'll try not to at least. Then the goals of the training, the big thing is for us to get back together and just have that quick reminder, refresher around the PBIS work that we've talked about in the past. I'm sorry, I feel like you're behind me.
You're fine.
I hate that. So wanting to make sure we remind you of all those big ideas around PBIS, we're going to give you some time to actually do some work so that you can feel really prepared. I'm going to warn you that I'm giving you time to do some work that's kind of big. So you probably will not finish all of it, and that's okay. So don't feel stressed out by that. I'm like a completer, so I get a little stressed by that, but I want to tell you it's okay, and we're going to work with you throughout the year to get to where everything is complete and you feel really good about what you've got going. So there's a couple different times where I'll say, hey, it's okay, you're not going to finish, and that's okay. And then we're going to start, and that's with our identifying our behavior matrix. We're going to work on your behavior matrix. Some of you are really familiar with this, and some of you are not familiar with it at all. So we're going to kind of break things up so that everyone has a chance to dig in, provide some input, and dig into that work so that we can get it all completed and looking really great before school starts, hopefully. And then we're going to start looking at teaching lesson plans. So we're going to talk about why we teach lesson plans, and I'm going to give you some time to work on those. So those are the big goals of just this morning, not this afternoon. This afternoon we're going to dig into restorative practices a little deeper. This is just a common graphic we want to put up and put before you. It is the PBIS. There's some people that joke about it being a tattoo that they have on their shoulder, but it's really this idea that we have systems, we have data, and we have practices, and when we put those things together and we do it in a really meaningful way, we're going to see some really great outcomes for our students. So when we dabble in one or the other and not touch on the other, we don't provide that full, complete picture of what it's going to do to provide support for our kids in a meaningful way. So we want to make sure we're looking at all of those things. This is the newest version of the graphic, which also talks about all of the culturally responsive pieces. A lot of times people get going on this work and they do it in kind of a generic way, and we have to be careful to pause and be sure that what we're doing is actually responsive to the students that are in front of us. So we have to know our students, know their values, know where they come from, so that we can create a system that truly supports the individuals that walk into our classroom. This is another one we're trying to make sure everyone sees so that you understand. You're going to hear these words as we go forward, especially throughout we have a formal partnership now within this grant that we have across the county, and we get to partner with you, which is really exciting. A lot of times grants exclude private schools, which I'm sure you guys have all been familiar with, and this grant specifically said you must include. So we were super excited about that because it's the first time we've been able to do this work here on this level. So what we're going to be talking about a lot is the Interconnected Systems Framework, which is taking PBIS and that basic behavioral structures and what we put in place for our students and integrating mental health supports. This is the year of all years, last year and this year, that this is just a huge issue for our students. They've faced so much trauma, so we want to make sure that we're integrating those supports really well. It isn't a co-located model where they go down the hall and see somebody, but how do we work together with our community partners, with mental health agencies to ensure our students are getting the best that they can get from all of us. So that's the big message you'll see as we go. The big message within that is that it's a single system of delivery. We all work together, that the access is not enough. We actually have to be doing things that work for our students, and we want to see outcomes. mental health is all of our jobs. We need to make sure that we're providing calm for our students in the midst of the chaos. How do we support them in the classroom? And then making sure we're using that MTFS model. So we're looking at a tiered delivery system to make sure that they get what they need. What do all kids need? What do some kids need? What do a few kids need? That was a lot of information, and it's going to be at the beginning of just about every presentation you hear from the grant as we go, because those are the big points of our grant right now. But we're going to dig into the PBIS overview, and I'm going to hand it over to Emily and stop talking so fast.
Thank you. You're welcome. Here you go.
All right. So we are recording, if you guys don't know this yet. We are recording. So if we want to go back and watch things and the information that we've missed, it will be available for us.
Great, thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so like with all important work, we want to start with that why. Why do we need PBIS? And you have been engaged in this work for about 2 years now, so we're just going to kind of take a moment and think about our own testimonials and think about how has the school climate changed? What have you noticed perhaps in your classrooms? What have you noticed change since being engaged with this work? And if you are not at a table with other people, if you could just kind of turn and join a group. So go ahead and share your own testimonials of what have you noticed around your climate and your culture of your school since starting this work.
This is my first
Intervention support.
This is my first meeting back.
Yeah.
So what are we?
So what have you noticed with the climate and the culture since having this work be in place over the last 2 years? Have you noticed a shift with your students?
I haven't. I teach first grade. I was going to say, you teach really young, and I teach like in a special way. Like, this is kind of odd. And they were a challenge last year. And I think that they were trying to get more positive. I don't know that it really was noticeable at the time.
Have you noticed anything school-wide? Think about that.
Can you help me with
Positive behavior intervention support.
Okay, then the IS, connected
Systems framework. Yes, yes.
They don't always do that. The problem is their follow through, but I've definitely seen that they know what they're supposed to do, they know where they can tell you it. They don't do it all the time, but they know, and they'll tell anybody what they're supposed to do. I do think we can hold them accountable. More awareness. Yeah, I think you can bring it up to them. They're like, you know how you're supposed to act in the hallway, and they actually do know.
Because I had 2 kids that I had to constantly write up because there's just problems. But then I get to 3rd grade, and they were really, really creative and engaged. But then by the end of that year, they started kind of taking advantage of, oh, the teacher's nice, I can get away with anything.
Yeah. You definitely have to like draw the line and like stand firm and like super consistent. Because if you're not, they definitely, like you said, they'll find the loophole. And they'll use it.
All right, if I could have you back in 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, in 1, and 0. I heard some really good conversations. Would anyone like to briefly share out what you said in your group about what have you noticed in the climate and the culture of the school since beginning this work? Maybe a brave soul over here. I heard some really good conversation around expectations. Yes. That's right. Yes. So, yeah, go ahead. What have you noticed? Sure.
For me, what I was saying, from someone who gets kind of a bird's eye view, I get to work with all of the grades because I'm in music.
Yeah.
So, I noticed that every single class is kind of different.
Sure.
Like, for example, I would work with the 1st graders. They're now 2nd graders now.
Yeah.
And they were so polite, always listening, always attentive. There's a lot of talent in that group, too.
Sure.
So they were very, very nice. But then my 2nd graders, and I don't write up my students very often, there were a couple of students in that class that I had to write up. You know, every single class kind of has its different quirks about it and different things in life that they're encountering.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're noticing that we've got students who may have encountered different traumas, and we're seeing that in the classroom. We're noticing some of those classroom expectations and maybe even carrying over into our special classrooms. Yeah. What have we noticed school-wide? Anything school-wide? I heard some talk over here around expectations and how the students really know those expectations. It's just going back with that important piece of making sure that we're teaching those expectations over and over again. Yeah. Anyone back there? Last thought?
So, I don't know if anyone's ever read the book, The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman.
Yes.
But it also, it was presented initially as like a marriage book, right? But it's also into kids and everything we do in life is about relationships, right? And if kids aren't feeling those relationships being met in other places, they come to school and they start to get these, met, right? Like their needs for love and relationships and acceptance, and doing things by saying, hey, you did this really well today, it's totally worth the affirmation. Or giving them a consider ticket, it's totally, you can start checking off ways that they feel loved and accepted within the classroom community that they're in, right? So I've noticed that, and I've noticed a shift in just the mindset of the youth.
So well said. So you are noticing that shift in the mindset and that shift in having those proactive pieces in place. And we'll talk a lot about the relationship piece today, especially as we get into restorative practices as well. And there's also a kid-friendly version of that book in case you wanted to know the five. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, so thinking about that why, we have to know our why for our school. And every school community is going to be different, right? But as we're thinking about building and creating this system, whether we're a kindergarten teacher or a fourth grade teacher, knowing that why for the school is critical, right? So thinking beyond just our classroom and looking at that bigger pieces like some of us were talking about, that class or that school-wide system, and knowing that why before we can get into the what. Going to watch this video, and I think it'll start right away. Okay.
And a lot of times when people hear the phrase, how do I know, the next thing they say is what? How do I know what? The key really isn't to know what. The key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have off now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We're in Winston-Salem. So Break Time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at a school. I was like, all right, you teach music? Can you sing? And then I'm just going to show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director? Yes, sir. All right, so let me get a couple bars of Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like thee. Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? Your uncle just got out of jail. You got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick. If you know the version, I'm about to see if that exists. Let me see what you got. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a Here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose.
So we have to know our why, right? So that we can walk in and towards our purpose. We clearly saw that difference when we just knew the what to when we knew the why. So I want you to take a moment, and we have little tubs on your tables, and go ahead and get out a sticky note. And on your sticky note, you're just going to self-reflect. So this is a personal activity. But what is your why for implementing PBIS? And we're going to save this for later. So try to make this just a really personal reflection about your own why. Your why, your personal why.
Why?
Your own why around PBIS. Why is that important to you? Maybe some of you are wondering your why, and that's okay. It's just a personal reflection right now, so go ahead and put whatever comes to your mind, whatever's in your heart, on your sticky note. Okay, so we'll come back to that sticky note in a bit, so go ahead and just put that in a safe spot. And we're going to talk about some possible reasons why around this work. So we're going to look at some data up here, and hopefully that's large enough for you to see. If I click. Oh, go back. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some ACEs. Can you raise your hand if you've ever heard of ACEs before? Okay, a few of us. Do I have any risk takers that could shout out, what do you think ACEs stands for? I can help you too. If you give me the first one. Yeah, Emily? Oh my goodness. So in the elementary world we would say, you nailed it. You nailed it. Yes. Adverse childhood experiences. And so these are things that children experience, and it ranges from abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. So we've got physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect. There are two that are not included in this data. Those would be divorce and emotional neglect. So we have physical neglect that is included. So these are all adverse childhood experiences that our students in Muskegon County experiences that cause trauma. If you look at this information up here from 2016, adults that have experienced 4 or more ACEs nationally was at 14.3%. In Muskegon County, adults that had experienced 4 or more of those ACEs was at 31.4%. So that's Muskegon County.
Why is divorce not included?
Why are those two excluded from
Yes,
the
and Amy, feel free to jump in, but my understanding is that it would skew the data so much because it is so common. Yes, yeah.
Which is just, just goes to show that when we're talking about the research behind ACEs and all of the things that we can talk about, this is low compared to what's probably the reality. So this is really the safe amount that we can say this is a bare minimum of our students that have that level.
Yeah.
But if we were to add those two in, it would skyrocket.
So if we look at childhood traumatic event and some ACEs over here, this was information taken from our 7th and 9th and 11th graders at the MyFi survey in 2018. And it shows that 26.8% of students had experienced 3 or more ACEs. So those are our students that we're looking at now. So we know that this is prevalent with our students that we're teaching. And those ACEs, that's going to be considered trauma. So if we're looking at a typical classroom of 24 high school students in Muskegon County, we'll see that over half have experienced one of our ACEs. That last row there shows us that we have students that have experienced 4 or more. So we know in our classrooms we have students that have experienced that and have gone through traumatic events. So research shows us that ACEs and trauma impacts the brain. See the brain of a healthy child over on that side, and on the right side you'll see the brain of an abused child, a child who's gone through ACEs. Now I want you to think for a moment, does anyone know the part of the brain that is activated when we are in that fight, flight, or freeze? And if you know what that's called, could you write it down? You've got some wipe-off markers and paper in the middle. What's that part of the brain called that's activated when we're in fight, flight, or freeze? And if you can't spell it correctly, that's okay. Anyone know what that is called? Pop quiz time. And if you have it, can you hold it up high? Yes, very good. I see it over here. It is the amygdala. Can everyone say amygdala? Amygdala. It is the amygdala that is triggered when we've gone through those ACEs and when we're in that constant fight, flight, or freeze. So your PSC, your smart part of the brain, you'll see there, it can't work the same way. That's the part that helps us with our math problems, that helps us be able to write sentences. So students that have experienced chronic stress day after day after day are constantly stuck on in their fight, flight, or freeze. It's like there's a bear in the classroom, but there's not really that bear. And so we have to shift our own perceptions. And I heard some of you talking about that mindset and how that's already starting to shift here. But we have to shift away from kids will do best and kids will do okay if they want to kids will do well if they can, right? Because if kids can do well if they can, then there's going to be something standing in our way. And how can we as the adult and the teacher help get whatever's standing in the way out of the way? So I want you to take a moment just to read over this quote, and I'll read it to you. If you see the student as having or being behavioral problems, you'll respond differently to him than if you see him as struggling to feel safe and calm. So it has to start with us and our mindset that these students may have gone through traumatic events. And trauma looks different to everyone.
We often say, too, sorry, I'm back.
Yeah, you can do it.
We often say, too, that behavior is often a symptom. So if you think about yourself, like I know I've had some stressful times this summer. Oh, my gosh, I have a 15-year-old learning how to drive. And my behavior has been a symptom of probably some larger things that are going on in my life. And it's like part of it, my husband, it's not meant to be. It's just that he's the one that is me, right? So, and he's the same way you love me, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, very good example. And so just like Amy's husband loves her anyway, we have to love our students anyway too, absolutely. Yeah. So what might this look like in the classroom when we have students that are in their amygdalas? Well, we know that that's going to be that fight, flight, or freeze. So if they are in fight mode, it might come out as being verbally or physically aggressive. It might be threatening others. That might be teacher to peers, might be peers to peers. It might be in flight mode. It might be hiding underneath their table every time you ask your student to get out their writing folder. And it might be freeze. It might be that disassociation where they're going to have that lapse of memory and kind of look spaced out a bit. So I want you to think, have you seen any fight, flight, or freeze symptoms in your own classroom? Okay. And quickly share at your table without using student names, what have you seen? Have you seen any of these characteristics? Go ahead and share.
Answer this about their instrument and they'll just stare. Yeah. And like you can see that they're just sorry.
If I could have you back in 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, in 1, and 0. Thank you. So I heard a lot of, I've seen all of them, and I think that might be true for some of you. Okay? And this is what it looks like when we are in that amygdala and not in our PFCs. So we have to create trauma-sensitive schools, schools that are safe, nurturing, stable, and going back to what we talked about earlier, focused on that proactive piece of building those positive relationships. And how do we get that? We get that with high expectations and high support. PBIS is not about hugs and excuses. It's about high expectations and high support and care. Right, so we're going to show you an image here, and we will dive into this more when we talk about restorative practices. But thinking about that high support and those high expectations, we have 4 different quadrants here. Now, if we have low support and low expectations, then we're going to fall into the neglectful realm. I'll let you look over that. There's a picture to kind of help you imagine what does neglectful look like, right? And we know that no one in here is in that realm. When we have high support, low expectations, well, we might be a bit permissive, which is going to cause some behavior problems. And we have that high care, but we still need those high expectations. When we have high support, and when we have low support and we have high expectations, we fall into that authoritarian realm. And we're going to look more of that compliance, demand, okay, not get the result that we want. We want to be in the high support with the high expectations so that we can fall into that authoritative realm and create that positive school climate. It's much like being a good coach. So that's the goal of where we want to be. So just take a moment, and what is the difference between these two? I'll let you read over the description on your own. What's the difference between authoritarian and authoritative? You can just shout it out.
I would say authoritative has clear expectations.
Yes, good. We have to have those clear expectations.
The kids don't know what they're doing.
Absolutely. So we have to have those school-wide and in our classroom. Good. Anything else?
I think there's the word teaching in the authority.
Very good. Observation, yes. So just like with our academics, we have teaching when we're thinking about PBIS as well. Okay. And we'll come back around this when we talk more about restorative practices too. Okay, so research shows us when we have high support and high care, we're going to see impacts in our school. We're going to see higher student engagement. We're going to see fighting and weapons decrease. We're going to see teacher reports of student aggression decrease. And prevalence of teasing and bullying also decreasing. And why is that? I think because we have to go back to that teaching part, right? They know those expectations are in place. We're giving them that high support, that high care, and we're teaching just like a good coach would do. So it's much like Jenga, which is Amy's favorite game. So she came up with this analogy here. And if you are a Jenga player, you know that if you remove one of those blocks, what's going to happen? It's all going to tumble, right? So we can't just have high expectations. We have to have high support as well. And that's going to get us to where we want to be. So let's think about the vision for this work, coming back to our why. Our goal is to have a positive school climate, regardless if we teach kindergarten, second grade, fourth grade. We want the whole school to have that positive culture and climate. The impact of that is going to be improved student outcomes. We just saw that the student engagement is going to increase. Students' SEL competencies are going to increase. We know that that's what our biggest Fortune 500 companies are looking for, are those skills within students. We want to make sure that our students are ready to go on into the world. And the vehicle to get there is school-wide PBIS, which we're going to be talking more about today. So the outcomes associated with our implementation, we will have improved student outcomes. Those academic scores are going to increase, right? That social emotional competencies, those are going to increase. Reduced exclusionary discipline, that has a lot to do with restorative practices. We're going to have less office referrals because we're building those relationships. We're going to have less seclusion and restraint. We're going to have less suspensions. That's the goal. Improved teacher outcomes as well has been shown. We have seen perception of teacher efficacy. We have seen teachers happier and healthier at work because it's a happier and healthier school climate and culture. So go ahead and go back to that sticky note now that we've talked a bit about the why. And is there anything that you'd like to tweak or add now that you've talked a bit and engaged a bit around this why and some possible why data points? And how does your why support positive student outcomes?
All right, does anybody want to share what you came up with for your why, or maybe how you tweaked it after reading a little bit more, learning a little more, hearing more? Go ahead.
I was like the teacher happiness aspect of it. Like I was super focused on like what will the kids get out of it. And based on personal experiences that we've worked together before, it wasn't like tears and lights. So like, okay, we're gonna make it today, and I'm gonna send the good note home. So I definitely think it's important for us to be happy. And feel good. And not just focus on.
It's that concept of like it's really hard to pour out of an empty cup, right? So like if your cup isn't full itself, it's really hard to give to your students. And we have some stuff that we talk about too around self-care within this piece. It's very, very important. I love that you focused on the student first, and then you're like, oh my gosh, it can be better for me, because you have that. We've seen this amazingness that's happened there.
So I teach band.
Yeah.
And when you said like the high expectations and high support, I'm like, that's what my class needs, because when I have a student who, like on a come on, you can do that high note. Like, come on, we can do it, and we kind of work through it and get that positive. Those are the students that will tend to stay in my program.
Yeah.
Are the ones that have gotten that type of encouragement through me, instead of those kids that just kind of fizzle in the background and maybe don't get that one-on-one.
Yeah, that's such a great example. My daughter's in band, so it's very interesting. This is like year number 2, so you can imagine what my house sounds like. I've got one in orchestra, one in band. It's been really fun. They're trying to do a duet. It's very scary. But the interesting thing is I don't know anyone who enjoys doing something that they don't feel that they're good at, right? So when you think about it, like my husband beats me at just about every sport, but I can whoop him at bowling. And so I like to go bowling with him. He's not a huge fan, but I really enjoy it, right? So when we think about our students, it's the same thing. So when they can feel that they can be successful because we've provided them with that sport, and we have that expectation of, oh my gosh, you can reach for this. How amazing, and how it changes their engagement, because they're like, oh my gosh, I can do it. And it does take some time to get there, and like with bands, there's a special gifting for people who. I was gonna say.
I kind of was like, oh, we're on the same page.
But Recorder did get her to clarinet, which got her to saxophone. So I think that was, and I hated Recorder season, and I really did not like the teacher that year. Why is this in my home? So Emily got to give you the really fun content, and I'm going to give you some more systemsy content, so you're welcome. It's going to be really fun. But the big thing is I think a lot of you are going to hit some of your bingo squares today. So what I want to show you, and I feel like it's like my moral obligation to provide as many triangles as possible in a presentation that has to do with multi-tiered systems of support. So PBIS, a lot of times people have struggled with what PBIS actually is, and what it is it's an MTSS framework for behavior and social emotional supports. So MTSS is a multi-tiered system of support where we talk about who gets what level of support. Within PBIS, we have that school-wide expectation. You have your school-wide. You guys have Crusader tickets. Ding, ding, ding. Check your boxes. You got it. You're welcome. But what you get within that is your Tier 1, check your boxes. So Tier 1 is your all students get this support. So we want to see, down here it says 80% successful. So let's be clear. Every single student receives Tier 1 supports. We know our Tier 1 is effective when 80% of our students are able to be successful at that level. So if we find that our Tier 1 isn't quite cutting it yet, and we only see like 60% of our kids are successful, we know we need to fix Tier 1 first. Because we have to we don't have the time, money, resources, all of those things to put into our Tier 2 and Tier 3 to fix something that we could fix at Tier 1. So Tier 1 is really preventative, proactive. We're putting it in place for every single kid. Every single kid might not even need everything we're putting into it, but we know that it won't harm them. Giving them extra support will never be bad. Tier 2 is layered on. This is one of my favorite graphics because you get 3 triangles for the price of 1. So this one right here is putting that extra layer of support on. We're not removing the Tier 1 support. That stays in place, and we add extra support because they're not quite getting there yet. We don't want to see that we want 15% or fewer. We don't want to see more than 15% in this realm if we're at a healthy base with our Tier 1. So if we have a healthy base at Tier 1, we want 15% or fewer receiving Tier 2 supports, partially because we know we don't have the resources to support more than that, because it is adding interventions and support onto that. We're going to progress monitor a little more frequently, and we're really going to target groups of students with common needs within that tier. Tier 3 is really where we get intensive. Again, the third triangle you get in this one is getting at those really intensive interventions, and you're looking at hopefully 5% or fewer. You're probably always going to have some students that fall into every single bucket, and that's normal and it's okay. So you don't want to get discouraged if you're like, oh, we can't get past that 5. You might always have 5% there, and it's okay. At any given point, they always say that there's about 20% of your students that are going to be dealing with issues throughout the day, and it will change. The student might change. So we also don't call this special ed, just so we're clear. That's something that oftentimes gets confused, is that Tier 3 is special ed. Our students are not Tier 3 because they're special ed. They are not special ed because they're Tier 3. And they're not Tier 3. We'll get to that in a second. So this is kind of the big overview of what that system looks like. This is the big thing around, this is a student-centered decision-making model. So this is one student. I always try and talk about myself because I was a hot mess in high school. It's probably why I became a high school teacher. Just a lot of life things happening during that stage of life. And I was probably all over the board depending upon the day. So I might come in one day completely fine, and I did not need anything extra from you. And the next day, you know, I had a hot mess at home. I had one year, my cousin like half died, and I didn't know if she was dead, and they sent me to school. Thank you, parents. So I came in hot mess Amy, needed all kinds of social and emotional support because I couldn't even function. Like, this is the cousin I was closest to in age. What are you doing sending me to school right now? But I had teachers who stood in that gap for me and helped me to get through that day. They talked to me. They pulled me out in the hallway. They said, you don't need to worry about geometry today. And I was like, thank you. So those types of things will happen. Did that make me a special ed student for math because I had a hard time that day and I couldn't focus? Absolutely not. Did I need tier 3 supports that day? Absolutely. So when we think about our students, we don't want to label them as any type of tier because they're going to fall into any tier on a given day. So I might struggle with a concept in class and need more intensive support from you for a day, maybe 2 days. Maybe I need it for a season, but I'm not going to stay there. It can fluctuate for each of our kids. Does that make sense? Okay. You guys see that in your classrooms? Yeah? Okay. Did you have a hot mess like me this last year? I don't know. Yeah. Seeing some yeses. Okay. So when we talk about that layering on that I talked about earlier of mental health supports, oftentimes, again, we would stick that mental health support up as a tier 3. It is absolutely not just a tier 3 thing. All of our students need to have some support at some level around how to deal with things that come at them every day. Like I just mentioned, I was a student. I was on the honor roll. I did really well. I graduated towards the top of my class. And I still needed some of those tier 3 supports throughout my high school career or even in elementary career. It was a tough life. So when these things happen, we have specific types of things that we do at each tier for mental health. We constantly say mental health is for all because as a teacher, you know your students better than anyone else. You are that first line of defense when they come into your room. Your smile, your lack of smile can be the thing that sets them up for their day, right? Sometimes it's that side eye that is the trigger for them where they're like, oh my gosh, I got that last night and it wasn't treated well afterwards. So we have to be really careful about the support we provide because we are the ones that set that tone for them as the adult. We give them more than their parents sometimes. So it's really important that we have that tier 1 piece down and we know how to help our students when we see things going on. And then tier 2 and tier 3, we're going to find that we need a little extra support. Maybe there's a counselor. Maybe there's somebody from Health West or Happily. I don't know if you have anything.
We have a counselor.
Yay, counselor! Yeah, she's like, thank you for bringing up my job. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so excited you're here. We've been talking about it for a couple of years, just the support and things that can be brought in so we can touch base and make sure you have support. So we've got lots of different things that we can offer across the county. The cool thing with our partnership with this grant is that we're also connected with Hackley, Community Care, Health West, and DHHS, and so we're going to try and get you guys connected with them as well so you can get some supports across what you guys need for your higher levels of tiers. So it's working. Where we get this MTSS framework is actually from the public health sector. So if you go, everybody, how many of you got a checkup in the last year, virtual or otherwise, right? Get your checkups, people. That's tier 1. So you have to do your tier 1. You have to get your checkups, right? We have an annual checkup. We go in. Some people avoid it, right? So we want to go in and have our checkups, right? When we find that there's an issue, they might send us to a specialist who can then specialize in things. So I had a hip injury one year, had to go to a specialist where they then said, you need physical therapy with somebody who really knows what they're doing. So those are the types of things that we see within that public health sector, and it's worked really, really well. We took that model on in education to say, we need to do the same thing for our kids. It's working for us as people, as a human race. Let's take that on and see how we can support our kids better in schools. So we're really learning across those things. We're intervening early. We're making sure that we have the right supports matched to needs. Everything making sense? I'm trying to fly through because I know this is your guys' favorite part. So the systems pieces are here. We see behavioral MTSS, which is PBIS. We see academic MTSS. In the center, we have these core features, which really center around the idea of we've got a team that leads this, and I know you guys have a leadership team that really works hard to get this stuff up and running for you and making sure you have the support that you need. We want to make sure we're implementing with fidelity, so we're doing what we said we would do for our students so they can have those supports. It's cool to have it on paper, but that does nothing for kids if they don't experience it. So we want to make sure we have that implementation happening. We want to make sure that we have that 3-tier continuum. We want to have database decision making. We don't want to make decisions without data because that is just shooting in the breeze, right? We want to make sure that we're targeting what actually needs to be supported. We want to have universal screening, which I know you guys do. You've got some of that for your academics, and we'll talk about behavior universal screening and what that looks like as well. And then just professional development, making sure you're constantly learning and growing. I think most teachers got into the profession because they liked school. or they experienced something in school. What did I say? What was the trigger?
I don't know.
No, be the bingo. What was the word?
Down on the other game, and now I'm the first one up on this one.
Woohoo! What was the trigger word? What got you the bingo?
Pardon? Professional development.
Ah, yay! I targeted you guys as being, the first one out and the first one out. It is. Look at all this fun. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a format. I'm just kidding. If you could get that and then hand it to me.
Is this one of them or is this no, that's one.
That would be so funny. She's like, that's my water bottle. Stop. Oh, well, and you're welcome for that, ladies. I totally made that happen. So the big thing we have is we want to work smarter, not harder. So we need to work together. We need to ensure that what we're doing for students is making the difference. We want to make sure it's matched to student need. Nobody wants to give extra where it's not needed. We want to make sure we have finite resources, finite time with our students. We want to make the biggest impact we can with the time that we have. So I'm going to give you a very, very, very fast overview of implementation science. Who's excited about that? Oh, wow. I really saw all of the jumping that happened at that moment. So implementation science, hopefully this will make you feel good about where you're at. And I am going to ask you a question on this at the end that you're going to get to answer. And you might find some of your bingo squares get checked. So what we find is for implementation science, there are 3 things that are multiplied together before we get to positive outcomes. So the first one is just that we have the right practices in place. So effective interventions. What are we doing? It has to be the right thing. The next one is we have to actually implement it correctly. So we have to do it the way it was designed. If we take it, bingo! Implement. If we take what we're doing and we implement it well, then we know that we can actually get to outcomes. But the last piece here that we often ignore is having an enabling context, which means we've got a system set up to support us. If I tell you, Brittany, to go out and implement, I'm going to pick something you would already know, a specific reading program, but I don't give you professional development on it. Let's say this has happened to you. I don't give you professional development. It lands at your doorstep on day 1, and you're supposed to go implement this, but you don't have any professional development. You're having PTSD. I'm sorry. So we know that we picked something that was matched for students. We know that you can do it because you have some skills, but you haven't been given professional development. You don't have supports because your support is stretched very, very thin. And then you're supposed to go implement with fidelity, right? Have I provided an enabling context for you? Have I given you a host environment that puts you in a success? No. So when these things happen, we know that we have not given that enabling context. So we haven't set up a system to support you in actually implementing what we're telling you to do. We have to have a system to support you in order to get to that outcome. These are multiplications, and if we're missing any of them, we have a 0 for outcomes. So it's just like basic math, right? So we have to have the right thing chosen, we have to implement it well, and we have to provide the supports that are needed. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is the part that hopefully is going to make you feel good about where you're at. Right now you're like, what is this? So exploration, installation, initial implementation, and full implementation. Those are stages that we go through when we implement anything. Whenever you put anything into place, I mean, you could talk about like cooking dinner, right? Like first you explore your recipe. Then you set up, you have to buy the ingredients and like get out a chopping board and have your knife ready and a pan and an oven that works, right? So all those things have to happen. Then it's your first time making it, so that's kind of you're like, oh no, let's see how this goes, right? So you have your initial implementation and you realize I put in way too much garlic and I am now fending off all the vampires in America. So we find this out. We might go back to installation and say, oh, we need to cut the garlic in half, right? So then we go back and we do an implementation and we're like, this is perfect. And then we replicate that and we do it all the time and everybody thinks it's the best dish they've ever had, right? So you can kind of see how that works, where we figure out what it is we want to do, we set up a system or the supports that we need to do it well, we try it out, we fix it, we try it out, we fix it, we try it out, we fix it, we just keep going back in that one until we get it perfect, and then we're at full implementation where possibly we could repeat it over other areas. Does that make sense? Around stages? Okay. So that's just a really basic overview of implementation science, and this is what happens as we implement. So it shoots and ladders. So what you can see is we attend PD and we grow. Then we go over here. We're on time to our meeting. Oh my gosh, the kid is off and running. And then, we already do that. So we're going to go backwards because our mindset needs to be improved. We're going to see all the way up here, we vote a coach off, or, oh my gosh, there's a global pandemic. So what we saw with a lot of our buildings was a huge slide down, but I think what we're seeing now is that they had that slide down and instantly got to this ladder. So much was learned. So don't feel like that global pandemic set you guys backwards in terms of your implementation. You guys have learned so much. Your kids have learned so much. And sometimes we've seen this silver lining of we now know the importance of mental health and supporting our students in a different way, which for PBIS land, this has been the silver lining of a long time. What was it, 18, 19, the last time we had a pandemic? That's how long it's been since this has been a really important topic. So we're super excited and pumped about that. But this is kind of how implementation can look. It goes back and forth. Things are going to happen. You just have to keep finding your ladder so that you can keep climbing. Making sense? Okay. So this is what we think it looks like. This is what it really looks like. But eventually, if we just keep going forward, we're going to reach that successful outcome. So just keep moving. I know it's a lot. I know it can feel overwhelming. This year is really exciting because we get to partner with you guys on it in a really intense way. So anytime anything comes up, we've got people. We're here for you. We're going to do everything we can. We're going to try and send you places and do things with you. It's going to be great. We'll see if anybody lets us send anyone anywhere, but we'll see what happens. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to ask you to stand up. You've been sitting a long time. You're like, we hate her. So I'm going to ask you to stand up. Stand up. I'm going to ask you to find a partner that you don't generally talk to. So I've been watching you. I see who you're talking to. Find somebody else and talk about where you think you're at with implementation of these three things. So school-wide BBA. So the last one is supposed to say behavioral interventions. I probably typed it up last night. I don't know. But I left off interventions. So school-wide PBIS, where are you at in implementation? PBIS in the classroom practices, and then behavioral interventions. And I'm going to put the stages back up so you can see those. So it's the school-wide, the classroom, and then interventions for your students. Talk about where you're at with implementation. Is that okay? Okay, so those are your stages. School-wide, classroom, and interventions are the three things you're talking about. New partner. One in the middle, so I'm figuring 5 here, maybe 10 there if we can, but I want to have that time for the...
Yeah, they really want to process and say
Yes, and there's a couple of really chatty ones that are super fun. I like to watch where they're at. The chick with the love languages book, she was the one. The first time I met her, I think she tried to indoctrinate me. It was fantastic. And she used a specific scripture, and I don't even remember what it was, but I used it back on her later, and I gave her the rest of it.
There you go.
She was like,
I like her.
I do know some things.
Yeah.
She's very nice.
She seems like she could understand.
She does. She loves the kids. It's fantastic.
The one in the green over there, I really enjoyed her restorative practices. She really community builder.
Yes. Oh, she's super cool. In the polka dot was at Muskegon Heights, and she was our, so she was at Vanessa's building. Her first year, she was just, at the end of the day, she was with Trisha McTaggart, was her coach. We put her in there with her. She was crying, like, she was done. She couldn't do it, and it was like every day after school. So Trisha went to work with her. It was miraculous, the change in her classroom. And I was like, and then Stephanie told me she hired her, and she was like, I was like, no. It's nice to have it come, and to have it come back in county, because she went out of education for a minute.
Did she? I was just
But she did, her classroom was like, we did walkthroughs and took data, and it was amazing. I know. I'm thinking they've had like 3 minutes. All right, thank your partner. Finish up and thank your partner and head on back. Thank you guys. Look, I didn't even have to use the attention signal. You guys were like, we're on it. We're masters. We're pros. We got this. 1, 2, 3 eyes at me, yes. My students, I was secondary, and it was an urban setting, and they constantly wanted to use rap songs and so I learned so much about like current pop culture, and now that I'm not in the classroom, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know things. So now I at least have teenagers that are trying to reteach me. So I'd love to hear at least one person tell me where you think you're at for school-wide PBIS in terms of implementation. Which stage do you think that you're at? You want me to put the stages back?
We talked about kind of like a group score, so we didn't help you. But,
Oh, that's okay.
We were kind of in between initials and full. Like we feel like we've got a lot of really good things in place.
Yep.
But it's taking that step from getting the kids to recite things to actually practicing them all the
Yeah.
time. Like we have the system.
Yeah.
It's like fully there.
Yeah.
So
That's exciting. So I'm very hopeful that what we're going to do after the break is going to help with that. Because there are some little pieces that we can do. I would fully agree that I think you guys are definitely, at least at that initial, probably doing a little installation and bouncing and getting very close to full. What you'll find is oftentimes as you do this work, you'll go and cycle through initial and installation for the longest time, because as you begin implementing, you're going to identify the things that are missing. So what don't we have in place that we need to have in place to get to where it's in full implementation? People sometimes get super discouraged by that. Please do not. When it's not going backwards, if anything, you're setting it up correctly, and it's expected. And it's expected to take 5 to 7 years to get to where you have that full implementation and outcomes realized. But if you're like super rock stars, they say 3 to 5 years. I try to throw 5 to 7 out so that when you do it in 3 to 5, you feel really good about yourselves. But the research has really gone back and forth. The big thing is if you have an implementation team that's working on it, then you actually are setting yourselves above those who don't have an implementation team that's working on it. So it's very, very cool that you guys have already kicked off. You've done a bunch of stuff. And now we're coming in full force this year with coaches and doing as much as we can to help you guys out so you can get pushed right up there where you need to be. Did anybody else have anything for school-wide that you thought maybe you were at in terms of stage that wasn't at initial, maybe teetering into that full? Y'all agreed? I'm seeing heads shaking. Okay, good. What about for classroom practices in terms of implementing in your classroom? Who has a response to that one? Not everybody at once. It's very overwhelming.
As an instructional strategy.
Wait time. Secondary teacher. I'm really good at it.
I guess I would say I'm one of the ones that has been on these committees building all of this. So I guess I feel like I'm at a different place maybe than others.
But then I'm a first year kind of, so I'm definitely in that.
Installation, like you're trying to figure it out. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So what you'll find is that's exactly what it's going to be, which is why there's usually crickets with that question. Across a school building, when you talk about individual classrooms, it's really based on individual progress towards that, and that's okay and it's normal. I will say, just so that it's out there, the number one predictor, they did a ton of research. We like to follow all the researchers and kind of hear the things that are, like, true. Kind of interesting. So the number one predictor of sustainability of PBIS across your school actually is not your school-wide system. It is your classroom practices. So that's why it's so important to take that school-wide system into your classrooms, because your individual support of the work and implementation with students is what actually sustains the work over time. So we get that school-wide system in place for you to connect to, but that classroom practice is just crucial in having this stay and stick over time with your kids. That's how your kids learn it, right? They learn it from you. Last one was behavioral interventions. Forgot the word intervention. Sorry. Where do we think we're at with behavioral interventions? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
I feel like at the beginning of every year, like you're in the exploration phase.
Sure.
With new students.
Yeah.
To like assess, their
Yeah.
needs and identify.
Yep.
Who needs what, and then you can kind of go through the
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So especially we're thinking about that student-specific implementation. Every year is new, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because oftentimes we talk about first grade teacher, they're going into second grade, tell me all the things. We have to give our students a chance to change, right? I really hope people give me a chance to change, because the hot mess in high school hopefully is not in front of you today. And we need to do the same thing for our students. From one classroom to the next, with a different environment, with different people, with different relationships, their behavior shifts. So when we pass along, if it's something like they struggled in reading, obviously, or if we know that there's something like socially they've struggled with friends, and we might see that same thing, obviously, but to say, you got to really watch that one, it really sets that teacher up to have that perception of that student right away, that they're going to be trouble for you. So we want to make sure we're giving them that fresh start, and just like with our behavioral interventions, we kind of get into that exploration of what's needed. What do we need to push forward, and then how do we set that system up so that we can implement it with our students really well. I love that. It's a great reflection. I loved all of them. That was great. So what I had for you next was a quick break. First of all, we're going to start with the end in mind. That's what this whole thing is. And then we're going to dig into some of the pieces that you guys are going to do throughout the year. We're going to talk about your matrix. We're going to talk about lesson plans next. You're going to have a lot of work time, so I'm going to have you guys working in groups on some things. But I'm going to give you a quick break, because most of you are like, oh my gosh, I need to go to the bathroom, or I need water, or maybe I just want to check my email. So have at it. I'm going to ask that you're all back at 9:25. 5 minutes good? Is 5 okay? We're a little behind. I just want to make sure you have work time.
Food in the lounge, coffee in the lounge, drinks in the fridge. Help yourself.
This is my kind of principal, man. I always had to bring my own stuff.
Go grab a snack.
I'm telling you, I brought everything. I'm prepared. I will take care of my own needs, because no one else takes care of my needs.
We will take care of your needs. It's a big focus. Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of plug. All right.
all the editing that's going to happen. I just keep walking in front of us. Hello, hello. I was going to say something that was not about this.
Oh, it's watching us. Hello.
It is. It's right here. It's microphone. I know. I was like, oh, I thought we should edit everything. 5-minute break. And we're going to do matrix. Yeah. Don't remember what I was going to say now. It's like I got distracted by the camera, and now I'm done. All the pressure of the camera. What is it?
Loading. There you are.
I can remember.
It'll come to you.
Yep, not going to remember. It's just there.
Such a good group.
Oh, I can go to that. They are. I know.
I know.
See, who are we missing with that?
It's too funny that the two over here.
I know. The first one out and the last one out. I know, it's
Emily,
great.
help yourself to our lounge. Too.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie.
We're having salad, chicken, grilled
Oh, you're so
delicious.
sweet. I brought my stinky tuna, so.
I brought a pack like that only it's chicken. The buffalo chicken. Have you had that?
No.
Oh, you haven't had it?
Mm-mm.
It's good.
I know my sister would probably like that. She hates that I have the tuna. It gets all over the counter, and I'm like, well, I cleaned it up.
Right. You got the smell.
She's like, I can just lingering. I know it's been there.
Every day. Maybe energy.
She just sent me a message about looking at a car. I found a car I want to look at. Can we do it on Wednesday night? And I'm like, yes.
Okay.
We have, there's so much going on. And we have the memorial, and then she was like, can we just stay at the memorial for 45 minutes and then go out to Lake Odessa?
To get the car? Is that where the car is? Oh, goodness.
Why are you doing this to me?
Did her car just break down, or what happened?
No, she had a brand new, she had a 2020 Telluride that she had leased, purchased it, and was like, I don't want these payments.
Oh,
And then a dealership offered her, but she had to take the offer within a certain number of days and miles in order to get it. And she wasn't getting anything close to it from anywhere else. And she was like, so today is, well, actually today was the last day, but she was like, it's the last day, we can't do it tomorrow, so we're going to.
Yeah, that
Okay.
is stressful.
I know. And then mine last night, we're driving it, and I've got, mine is old, and Emma's going to buy it when she turns 15. I'm just going to go find another one. But it's got something happening in the suspension, and we heard it last night, and I was like,
There is always something with cars.
I know. And I always buy the used. I mean, I commute so far that I'm like, I'm not going to get something that I'm going to rack up miles on later.
Because, traveling with kids, vacations.
Yeah.
No, we've never done the lease life. But
No, neither have I. Well, she got divorced. I know. She got divorced, moved in, got a new job, and was like, I'm going to go all out and get a really nice car. And then she's like, I don't want this payment.
I'd rather have money for other things.
Yeah. Well, and with Alex in California, her son is in California for Marine. So she's like, I just want my money to be in airplane tickets.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. And why do you have to pick the week that I have?
Yeah,
I know.
Get those miles.
I know. That's what I told her. I said, you need to start earning miles. And she was like,
It'll pay for it herself. Yeah.
The wisdom just kind of.
Yeah. Did you just
look
it all out?
How do you not?
I will share some with you.
I know she's going back to school, so she wants to go back to school.
That's awesome.
Yep. And she, for finance, so she's going to get an accounting degree. And she asked Katie Flynn, who's the associate supervisor. Yep. She asked her, what do you need? Because I want to be with you forever, and so I want to get a degree that's with you. And so she's paying for her to take some school finance courses through the MSBO, and then she's going to do an accounting degree on the side. I know. Well, they do a tuition reimbursement there, too.
They don't.
I know. I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. I have nothing else to do. I like the ginormous watts that are being thrown. Oh no. It's sideways. Look at where it's at.
Chocolate. That is what we were missing.
Look at. What are you doing? I'm over here.
Well,
look at. It's like it's mad at me. I'm right here. Follow me. There we go. Just needed a reminder of who its mother was. All right, we ready to bring it back together? Look at that. Look at that lull started. Everybody got their snack. Everybody feels fueled. Everybody's okay. All right. So we're going to get started. You guys have a good chunk of work time embedded in this time. So I'm going to give you some tools and some resources, and we're going to go over a couple of things. I'm going to share with you all of the really great work that you've already done. This is the section where I said I'm going to start you on some things, and then I might be like, I'm so sorry, you're not going to finish. But you're going to be very, very close. This one has already started for you. And I know some of you, this is going to be new, and that's okay. So don't feel lost. Some of you haven't seen this as much as others, and that's absolutely fine. So we're starting with one of the key pieces of any kind of PBIS system is having your school-wide expectations identified and defined, which you guys have done a lot of work around. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, show you your progress, and then I'm going to give you some work time to do a couple things that you guys might want to tighten up. So first of all, when we talk about our school-wide expectations, this is where you guys have, actually I'm not going to even go there yet. I'm going to talk about this slide because I've got it in another one. The big thing about this is that we're trying to provide direction, create common ground, clarify what's valued within our system. We're going to build some consistency across the school, so we're using common language. Our students are seeing common language and themes coming from us. And we're going to want to make sure that we have that overarching theme of culture, what we want to see in our building. So the big thing about this is that it's really easy for us to individually do things to support our students. What's really challenging for our students is having to adapt to everybody's individual style of doing things. When we can be consistent together, our students aren't using their brain power to adapt to us. They're using their brain power to actually learn in our classroom, which is exciting, right? That's what we want. So if they see that across common settings, if they see that across different classes, so maybe in music or band, as well as in their classroom or any other special, and we have art, we have lots of different things that we do in the cafeteria. If they're seeing that consistency in language, their brain power can be focused on learning or doing the right thing rather than trying to adapt to a different set of expectations, if that makes sense. So the big thing that we have, which you guys have, so it's very exciting, we want to have 3 to 5 specific positively stated expectations. We want to make sure it all aligns with our mission and vision and what we value, and we want to make sure that we actually are like teaching this to our students. It's not just something we expect them to know. They have to be taught these pieces. Without those, we really are left without that common language that we can get. So like as you can see here, so yeah, have everybody seen this movie? If you have not, I highly recommend it. It's Office Space. It's hysterical. Lots of dry humor if you like dry humor. So if you could just give us some clear expectations, that'd just be great. So making sure that we have that in there, it helps us with that, again, with the students being able to connect with what we're expecting from them across settings. It also helps us with the teaching and monitoring of those behavioral expectations. So any student in any setting, we can support them. So high five. Everybody can air high five. Woohoo! I don't know if you guys do social distancing with your high fives. But you guys did it. Yay, you have it. So I know in the past you guys had Crusaders was your acronym, and you were using that, and you had, so there was something off of each letter, right? It had expectations across that, and it was a lot, right? Kids struggled with that. When we came in and talked to them, they struggled. They couldn't really tell us everything because it was a lot for them to remember. Now, what you guys have done over the past 2-3 years is you've shifted to Crusaders R, and then you say respectful, responsible, safe, and Christ-like. So these are your positive stated. You've got 3 to 5, and you're putting out there the values that you have within your community. So awesome job. You're there. The next thing that you do is you take those pieces. So we take these 4 characteristics that we would want to see in our students, and we're going to build it out into a matrix. And we're going to talk about what each one of those things looks like in each area. So down here on the bottom of this sheet, you can see what the critical features are around how to build that out for each area. It's in your folder of your documents, so don't worry about trying to read the small print here. But these bottom 5 are the things that we would look for within those areas when we build it out. So when we build out our expectations, we identify those common settings within our school. So you guys already have those identified in your own matrix. We determine what each of those expectations look like. So what does it look like to be responsible in the cafeteria, right? So we're going to talk about those responsible things. So make sure you clean up your own mess. Make sure that you eat your own food and you're not eating your neighbor's food. We don't say that. So we want to be concise and positive, and we want to avoid what I just did. So we want to avoid the no and the don't. We want to tell students what we want to see, right? So tell them what's expected, not what's not expected, because they're going to replace that not with a different behavior that might not be what you want. So just tell them what it is that you want to see. And then we want to make sure that we have that in each setting, which is already said. So this is an example of one that's out there. It's an elementary one. It's respect, ownership, attitude, and responsibility, or ROAR. So they turned it into a word. You don't have to do that. It's perfectly fine the way you guys did it. They have each area identified, and then they've said, what does respect look like in each of those areas? What does ownership look like in each of those areas? So here's another one. This is actually Shetler and Fruitport. Same thing. Safe, respectful, responsible. Very similar to yours. They're lacking one. Then they have all of their areas, and then they have all the things listed here. The cool thing that you'll see in this one that we are just starting to see within people's matrices is some more of these social emotional competencies that we might want to see our students displaying. So over here, it's what do I do when I'm upset? So when I'm upset at school, what's the safe thing for me to do? When I'm upset at school, what's the respectful thing for me to do? When I'm upset at school, what's the responsible thing for me to do? So they're kind of embedding it in its own little column. Super fun. Yeah. I have seen yours.
Why can ours not fit on a page?
Well, you have a lot of areas identified, so I think that that's part of it, and we'll work with you on that so that you can have a nice clean one too. We'll help you get there. Yeah. Yeah. And some of that's just formatting. So it could be formatting, it could be language, and we'll look. So today we're going to look at that a little bit. And we're going to help you guys to get it where you want it to be. Yes. We have some templates, too, that we've put in a folder for you. These are behavior matrix posters so that you can see what it looks like, and you guys have some that you started as well. So in the hallway for the Panthers, this is what it looks like to be respectful. This is what it looks like to have ownership, be accountable, and be responsible. So underneath it are those pieces straight from the matrix so that they can see what it means and what it looks like for me to be the crusader, in your cases, in these other areas. And it's visible for them to see. So this is another one where we can see the SEL embedded. So you can see the purple SEL here. So this is really talking about those coping skills or social emotional skills that we might want to see in each setting based on each one of their chosen characteristics or attributes. Does that make sense? And these examples, we have tons of them in there for you. So you guys are going to be able to look at them during your team time, but I'm just giving you kind of an example to look at here.
If anyone is really engaged and loves this work, this is what our school improvement team does.
So what I'm going to give you some time to do. Oh, sorry, go.
I just keep seeing SEL, and it's on here too. What is that? And I think you said
social.
In one. I always use that attention signal because I try to honor. I know you've got such great thoughts going on in conversation, and then you can have that last thought with your colleagues. And we will come back around with some more work time in just a moment. We're going to talk about why do we teach behavior expectations. So that kind of connects back a little bit to what we were talking about with camp. What is that why? Why do we need to do this? And so we have an elephant in the room, right? So if you look up there, shouldn't students already know what is expected of them to behave? And wouldn't that be wonderful if all of our students came to us every day knowing exactly what our expectations were? We could say, oh, I could see you went through first grade. You know exactly what my expectations are in second grade. But the reality of that is we know that our students aren't going to know those expectations all of the time. We have to teach them just like we teach academics. We have to model, we have to practice, we have to reteach, we have to make sure that we're teaching in context all of the expectations, and we have to make them very clear to our students. And that's all of that work that we've been working on so far together today. So, some questions that we need to address to kind of get our mindset in the right place. Isn't it the parents' job? Now again, wouldn't that be wonderful if all of the parents taught students those school-wide expectations and they knew exactly what it should look like to be safe, So we practice, we have expectations, we model. Some of our students need to have more opportunities to practice, and they need to be retaught expectations over and over and over again. We need to make it very clear what it looks like to have hands to ourselves. I tried, they just don't listen. And so we know that we can't just plow through and keep going, because what's going to happen? Are they going to miraculously start listening? No, we have to stop, we have to take a step back, and we have to reteach. Anytime you get below 80%, we're going to reteach. And so that means school-wide reteaching, just like it means classroom reteaching, right? So we know that we have to teach those expectations in the beginning of the school year. We have to teach them after a major break. We have to teach them anytime maybe there's a change to our climate, whether that's a new student that comes in or a student that leaves. We have to make sure that this is a year-long process and focus. So why develop a system for teaching behaviors? Again, we've got those behaviors in academics. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? We have to make sure that we have those SED skills in place in order for students to be successful with their academics. We have to make sure that we're explicitly teaching. Procedures and routines create structure. Just like our Jenga, we have to have our high expectations. We have to have our high support and care so that we have structure school-wide and in our classroom. Repetition, we know, is key to learning any new skill, whether that's reading or riding a bike or brushing our teeth. Any new skill, whether it's a social-emotional behavior skill, needs lots and lots of repetition. So we have a little quiz for you. You can get your wipe-off boards in front of you real fast. We'll see. Do a quiz together. Pass one out. There should be a marker right in there for you. And my first question for you is, for a child to learn something new, it needs to be repeated on average of how many times? Just take a guess. Once you have your answer, you can hold it up high. Okay, and you've got the same. 21, 30. Amy, what do you see back there?
27, 25, 10, 7.
Okay, so to learn something new, it needs to be repeated on average of 8 times. Who was closest? Does anybody have 8?
We had a 7.
You had a 7. Nice, nice. Okay, good. So 8 times. That's something new. Think about our kindergartners. Think about our kids that maybe are coming to school for the first time. Think about all of our students after a pandemic year like we had last year. Some of these things are going to be very new. So what do you think? Adults average blank time. Go ahead and write your thinking on your whiteboard.
So we know the child is 8. How many times for the adult?
How many times for the adult? Yes, to learn something new. I see 10, 21, 4, 12. Okay. The correct answer is 10 have that fluency with how to ask help with their teacher, but they're not sure how to ask help in the cafeteria or out on the playground. That means it's not fluent yet. Just like with reading, they're not quite there. They need more practice. They need more support. Classroom and school-wide procedures and routines are undefined or inconsistently enforced. That kind of goes back to those champs expectations, right? If I say you need to raise your hand for help, but then I let Amy come up to me and she can get help, and then I have Stephanie come up to me and she can get help, and then this time I'm going to snap on Stephanie because I lost it and I'm frustrated, then I wasn't being consistent with what I, as the adult, wanted. So I need to make sure what I say and I expect I'm following through with. Skills are not taught in context with opportunities for practice. So think about when we're teaching students short vowels. We're going to teach them their short vowel sounds, and then we're going to apply that to words, and then we're going to apply that to text, because that is teaching in context. The same goes for when we teach our school-wide expectations. When I teach my students the right way to use the restroom and what that looks like as a crusader, then I'm going to go into the restroom and I'm going to model that. I'm going to practice. I'm going to have others practice. I'm going to provide feedback. I'm going to provide behavior-specific praise. And when I see that my students aren't meeting that expectation again, I'm going to go back and reteach. I'm not going to throw it up and say, oh, why do we not know this? We're going to go back and we're going to reteach, right? Okay, so I want you just to take a second and think about all of these skills that you have learned in your lifetime. Using the bathroom, using a fork, brushing your teeth. And take about 2 minutes and share with just an elbow partner, how were you taught to do one of these skills? What did that look like? Sometimes you maybe had a song to remember what to do. Maybe there was a poem that helped you remembering the steps. Go ahead and pick one of those skills and turn to your shoulder partner and share. How did you learn to do those things?
We never had to my mom. Yeah. Never got
What's that?
So true. This is so true. taught before.
Absolutely. So we know those expectations weren't taught. And so because of that, what did we see? We saw absolute chaos. It wasn't clear what the voice level should be. It wasn't clear where they should go, how they should get there, what their movement should be. Was it very clear that the other classes had practiced that? Yes. Was it very clear that the other classes had explicitly taught that? Yes. So watching that clip, we would never say that that's on the student. That was completely on the teacher, wasn't it? Yes. So that teacher needed to go back and make sure that they're reteaching all of those expectations. Oh, sorry, don't do it. Click me to the next one. There we go. All right, so we will kind of end on this little tidbit. If you have children at home or if you teach young ones, I'm sure you can relate. You have to teach the behavior that you expect, right? And I think somebody over here was talking about wood chips, and even with our 2-year-olds, that we have to make sure those expectations are clear. And it's very, very true. Right.
So I'm going to funnel us into a little microphone for whoever is listening to this riveting presentation later can hear me. So we're going to get into actually looking at developing lesson plans. So we're going to use our behavior matrix to kind of guide how that would go, because you have the matrix, you have the locations identified, you have the expectations identified. Now it's a matter of deciding how we're going to teach those things. So we want to develop that lesson plan. We want to develop a schedule for when we're going to actually teach. And then we want to talk about when's the initial teaching going to happen and what are some natural times, as we've already talked about, for reteaching. Right, so we already talked about this summer, they have relearned some things, right? So they've had some opportunities to learn some behaviors or some things that maybe aren't appropriate for the classroom. So we're going to need to go through and make sure we're helping them with be you, do your thing. And here in school, we don't just stand up and run out of the room like you could stand up and run out of your living room, right? There's a safety issue there. So we want to make sure that they understand, hey, we have some expectations around how we're going to get out of the classroom. Again, think about your SEL considerations, and there are a couple of stars that will pop up as we go around things that we should think about when we're talking about social and emotional skills that we want our students to see. So step one is we use our behavior matrix. We want to make sure that we're always looking back to this so that every time we're teaching in a location, we're tying it back to respectful, responsible, safe, and Christ-like. So we can continue to kind of glean onto that school-wide system that we set up. So this is what your matrix is-ish, but here's yours. And I know we talked about formatting. Don't get stuck on formatting because we're going to play with formatting. You guys already have a ton of work done, and I know the specialist teachers, we're just getting started, so don't feel stressed because we're not actually going to touch that right now. But you guys have a ton of work already started. You have a ton of things set up. So now it's a matter of formalizing how we're going to teach those things to our students within those areas. We also have these expectations over here where we've made them for the area, the posters for the area. The big thing, if you, I know Stephanie is aware of the work of Anita Archer, but Anita Archer is absolutely fantastic, and she does a lot around explicit instruction. Just saying, if we expect it, we need to pre-correct it. If you expect that they're going to go out, your 3-year-old's going to go out and pick up all of the wood and relocate it, wood chips, sticks, whatever it might be, we want to pre-correct for that and say, remember where the wood chips are supposed to be, on the ground. We leave them where they are. I have to do it with my kids because we have like rocks in our pathway, and they like to relocate those rocks into grass that then gets shot out of the lawnmower into random places. So certain things we just know to pre-correct. You guys already have your posters, which is fantastic. You have things started. Again, I don't know if they're permanent where they're at, but we're gonna actually help you guys out with getting them printed so that they'll be up so you can refer to them with your students. We're hoping to be able to do it before the first day of school. All the fingers are crossed on that to make sure that our print shop can get them done for you, but you'll have some posters up that you can refer back to with your students while you're doing your teaching. Critical features, that's a big part of it, and you'll find when we get into the documents, there's an actual document in there so that you can make sure, just like what we had for the matrix, there are critical features for lesson plans, and we want to make sure that those things are in there. It's just like a checklisty way of doing things. I love checklists, so I tend to get really excited about those. But it's a way that you can look through your lesson plan and be like, yep, got it, yep, got it, yep, got it, so that we're making sure we're hitting all those things that are important. We want to make sure the expectations are clearly defined. It's being taught in the location. We want to make sure that we're providing a reasoning around it. So whenever I talk to my kids are like so used to this, what's my job? It's to keep me safe and to teach me to do the right thing. Like they repeat the thing. It's hysterical. But when we're talking to our students, we want to make sure they understand why Examples are provided, so we want to make sure that we provide the example of what we're saying. So when we said swing safely or whatever it was, we want to provide an example of what does it mean to swing safely. We also want to provide a non-example. What does it look like to not swing safely so that they can understand what it is that, wouldn't be fitting. The big thing about the non-examples, to just throw in there, I think we say it a few times throughout here, don't make the non-example look or sound too fun. Because if it does, they're going to be like, oh yeah, let's try that out. So we have to be really careful. We also say when you're doing the teaching of the lesson plans, sometimes it's nice to have students model. The right way to do it has been, especially with the younger kids, to see an older kid model. Something about that is just magical. However, we would always ask that the adult model the non-example so that we're not having this student model that non-example, because sometimes the older students especially can make it look super fun. And we don't want the non-example to be more fun than the example. We want to give our students opportunity to practice, and then we want to make sure that we actually acknowledge when they're doing the expected behavior, which sometimes this can be a challenge for some people to acknowledge expected. They're like, well, I don't want to acknowledge if they're doing above and beyond. Just so you know, we want to acknowledge expected. Like, wow, thank you so much for doing this, whatever it might be that we expected of you, because it gives them that reinforcement around doing the right thing. You guys get a paycheck, you come to work, right? Same concept. If that paycheck were removed, you might not feel so inclined to the expectation of showing up to work, right? Some of you would, because there's a moral and ethical thing behind it. But for most people, that paycheck has to show up for me to show up, right? And we have a living to make. So there are certain things that happen. You'll see, like, anybody have Starbucks app? Anybody drink Starbucks? Oh my gosh. Okay, thank you. Maybe it's a Let's Go keychain. Like, we all have some kind of Let's Go M perks for Meyer, those types of things. Same concept. They are rewarding you for shopping at their store. So you're shopping there more because I get M perks. I got $9 off my next grocery order. I will be going to Meyer for my next grocery order because I know that I can just earn it. So those types of things we want to make sure that we're modeling. And Meyer isn't doing anything extra for you. Starbucks isn't doing anything extra for you. They're just rewarding you for being a loyal customer. So same kind of concept with our students. So there's a checklist that's actually in your folder within your documents that talks to you about the critical features, so you can use that as you're going through and developing your lesson plan. And you can use it, I think, do they have paper form for that, Emily? Is it a paper form for them for the lesson plan? No, I think, or the paper. Not paper form? Yeah, it's different. Yeah, okay. So the big thing with examples and non-examples, I'm going to just get to it so you guys can start playing with those papers. Making sure that we have an understanding for our students of what we do expect to see, and then making sure that we also know what we don't expect to see. If we don't give that non-example, sometimes they don't understand what it is that they're not supposed to do. We always want to stay positive with our, this is what I expect to see, and this is not what I expect to see. I always tell the story of my nephew who, he was in like 3rd or 4th grade, went into the bathroom. They had the bathroom attached to the classroom, and he went into the bathroom to wash his hands, and he looked in the mirror, and he was like, oh my gosh, my hair looks horrible. What if I forgot to wash it when I was in the shower? And so he started having this like mental list that went of the things that he's like, I don't know if I washed my hair. So he thought, well look, there's soap, there's a sink. So he was standing in the bathroom that's attached to the classroom, washing his hair like this in the sink. So he did that and then got the paper towel out and was drying and trying to restyle it. And he came out of the bathroom not realizing that water went everywhere. He had it all down his shirt, but his hair was clean, and he was like so excited to be clean and prim and proper for his class. And he got, like, they had some kind of flip chart thing. So he got the red, you're going straight to the office, and mom's being called, and mom got called down, and she was, and my sister is my sister, and she was like, why are you washing your hair in the bathroom? What are you thinking? He's like, it was dirty. All like needs to be washed, but there is an example of, this is a non-example of what we would do in the bathroom. It's just for our hands. So we would want to teach our students those things. He had no idea that what he did was what was not expected of him in that moment. So this is the importance of teaching the example and the non-example. We don't want our students to go in the bathroom and take a full-on shower. We want them to wash their hands. Even if they're stinky. If you're stinky, come to me. We can talk about a different method of solving that problem. But after you go to the bathroom, it's the flush, wash, get out, right? So we've got those expectations for them. Very, very important. So you can see these are some of the, I can't remember this guy's, what's his name? Oh, Wrong Way Willie. It's on there. So the Starman was the superhero, and the Wrong Way Willie was the one who did it the wrong way. So the students were able to see it kind of in a superhero format in this school, and they did a lot of videos for their reteaching. Initial teaching, they always did in the location, but reteaching a lot of times they would do some videos as a way to kind of buffer when they saw that things were happening. Super fun. The kids loved it. So those are just some ideas. So what we're going to do is in your folder, I'm going to get into it just so I can show you where exactly it's at. There are two things that I'm going to point you to. One is that critical features checklist, which is that the one that you're holding? Is that for lesson plans? Or is it for the matrix?
School-wide expectations.
Okay, so that's probably for your matrix then. So I'm going to show you where the one for lesson plans is so that you can see it. And because it's all electronic in there for you. And then there's also an electronic template for you to use to start creating lesson plans. I'm going to have you stay at your table, so if you're not with people, get with people. And I'm going to assign you areas to start working on for lesson plans. This is the part where we're going to try and give you a large chunk of time. There are example lesson plans in there for you to see what other schools have done. Then there's a template for you to create your own. You're going to use your acronym and your matrix to talk about those things that we expect to see. We're going to be here with you, filtering around and helping as much as possible. So I'm going to point you real quick to the spots in the Google folder so that you can see it, and then I'm going to have, we're going to assign you locations to start working on.
And just so you know, we'll all use these lesson plans. So we're kind of dividing and conquering, okay?
All right, so you're in the PBIS refresher folder. So if you're at that PBIS, so you went to the participant resources, PBIS refresher folder, hopefully still. There are lesson plan examples right here, this folder. So if you click into there, you can see all of these lesson plan examples. Within that, there are some blank lesson plans that you can make a copy of and keep for yourself, and you can do that for your location. You'll want to have at least one person being your recorder during this time, so they're going to need to make a copy. When they copy, they can share it with the rest of the group so that everybody can get it if they want, but one person needs to make that copy. So, and if you need help with that, we'll come around and help with it. So those are your different ones you can look at. You can see it's got the different places. There are some high schools, some middle schools, and then Edgewood is elementary. I'm not sure if that one is combination template. Oh, that's just your template. Okay. So that's just a different template where it combines together. So you've got a high school, and then you've got your Edgewood is your elementary. So you can see what it looks like, and you can start to look at what they have in there for language. You can also Google PBIS lesson plans, and you can find tons out there. We try to pull from local resources so you can see what's been done locally. And we've already looked at most of these to make sure language is what we want to see and not what we want to see. We don't want to provide you with a non-example within our example. So we're trying to give you the example of the right type of language to use. So what I'm going to have you do is figure out who your recorder is within your table, and we're going to come around and we're going to assign you locations. So we've already got those predetermined, and they're the common locations everyone's going to use. Does that sound good? You guys have any questions about what you're going to do? Everybody's super pumped. You know what's after this? Lunch-ish. All right, I'm going to come around with give you a location for your table. So if you can find out who your recorder is, start getting a template up that you can copy, that'd be perfect.
Our special teachers is working on our own lesson plans with their own classroom.
What was that?
Special teachers, can we work on our own lesson plans like with our own classroom, or are you giving
So we're going to do just the common areas right now, and then the classroom areas we were going to save for later so that the classrooms can be done by individuals because the teachers look at themselves as well. Okay. That was the plan.
Okay.
I'm not going to give the police approach.
Well, no, that's, I'm just like, I don't know.
No, I hear you. I'm doing it right now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So this table, I'm going to ask you guys to look at hallways and bathrooms. So if you can have those two locations, and that would be a lesson plan for hallway and a lesson plan for bathroom. Just get as far as you can.
I'll have my kids say that.
Okay, so for this table, if you guys could see and get as far as you can at one time.
Here's the thing, I have like general ideas, but
You guys divided up? We did.
Yeah.
Okay, good plan.
Hallway, we're gonna have
Yep, perfect. Are you doing okay? Yeah. Okay. So we're taking it from the response, right? Nope, you're taking it straight from your matrix. So you would go to the matrix, and then you would look at those expectations, and then you kind of go through the slide. There's a critical feature. It's here, I think, but I go in your folder. It should have this concern. Right. I think mine is actually ready. Much Let me, I should probably show them the critical features report.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I made an error and did not show you the critical features document, so I wanted to show you really quick. There's that lesson plan critical features document that is in here, and it is not inside the example. It's right here, the critical features for teaching expectations. So when you get in there, it actually gives you the expectation lessons critical features, so you can check that off. So it was right in that main folder of the PBIS refresher. So PBIS refresher, critical features, and then you have a folder of everybody got it?
Totally gonna do it though.
So I was going to say, to me it looks like that set 3 is literally almost a complete copy paste there. That is me.
Yeah. Okay, so then that is where the first one I'll type
white all the time. Here's this year. Here's last year. Crazy with white. The year before that, crazy with the white shirt. I have other ones in my, you know.
That's so funny.
Apparently, I wear colors.
Right here.
I love it, Stephanie.
I'm gonna go trickle on over to you.
That's what's exciting. Talk about what you're not supposed to do. But don't smile. So make sure you're doing it. So show them what doesn't look good. And students do it. And that's understandable. Not understandable. We added it. This is practice. Like we're talking not washing hands. Letting your hair slow down. Talk to friends and stuff.
Why scenario?
Yeah. Or I am not ugly. Practice the positive behaviors. Have the students wash walk down the stall. You know, you have to teach that. Right, I know, but it does make it hard. How am I going to go in the right way? So it would be. We can I know. Having washed their hands the right way.
Right.
Show me repeating in the class.
We can practice preventing.
I have to think too, so.
You can always use your imagination.
Right, you can pretend, all right, this is this guy. Okay, what did you say? I'm not teaching. Yeah, we can sit here. Right, you can figure it out.
Yeah. And you can use the dividers. You can. Oh, right. Yeah.
Like I said, if you're put on the sofa or throwing it at each other.
Yeah, I
do a pile. Yeah, with that little like corner. Oh,
Three more boxes.
Are you done? Oh, cool.
Yeah, lunch recess for homework, library, lunch. Would you be okay with me? Yeah. Okay. Something like that. I know.
Well, Megan's Catholic, so.
Do we need to list scenarios for the next step that you do? Oh yeah. So the more you can put in, the more consistent it's going to be across. So let's just put walking to and from different locations in the building. Like math, the gym, the library, lunch, resource, in this hallway. Yeah. Getting ready at the end of the day. I'm sorry.
Luckily, it does not take.
All right, I'm going to ask you to pause where you're at. I know you're working really hard, and I'm sorry. This is that moment where I said you're not going to finish, and it's okay. We're going to continue to work with you guys on this, especially this group that was like, what? We're going to continue to work with you on these posters and on your lesson plans, your matrix, all of that throughout the year. Our hope is to get you off to the strongest start possible as the year starts next week. So our hope is to have you guys feeling really confident moving forward. So I'm going to ask you to pause. You can go back to your seats if you're not there. And we're going to start talking about a teaching schedule to round out the last part of our day here. Last part of the morning, I guess, not the last part of our day. Until the bitter end today. All the way.
I need presentation or evaluate or committee or formative. She's the committee. Bingo.
Any other bingos out there? Yeah. Oh man, I'm getting there. This might be the thing to get there. I'll try and pull it. I can. I'll recycle some. Oh, I don't have this. Okay, so we're going to get started back on talking about step 2. So step 1 was to actually begin developing those lesson plans based on your matrix. Step 2 is starting to talk about a schedule for teaching those lesson plans. So don't stress out. I know the lesson plans aren't fully developed yet, and that's okay. We're going to start talking about when you would want to schedule these things and have some conversation on like typical time frames that you're going to want to make sure you're ready to actually deliver the lesson plan. So oftentimes what you'll find is that there's some kind of kickoff at the beginning of the year. And that kickoff is when we would begin starting to talk about PBIS in general, so talking about being responsible, respectful, safe, and Christ-like. So we're going to kick off the year with those words in front of our students to say, this is who we are as Crusaders, right? Then we're going to start talking about within our classrooms with our students, we're going to take them into those locations and we're going to teach those lessons. That can oftentimes present a barrier because it's not like every classroom could go down the hallway and teach the lesson plan at the same time, right? So we have to start thinking about staggering our times. Who's going to be in the library at which time? Who's going to go down to the cafeteria to teach those lesson plans? Who's going to be out on on the playground at what time teaching those lesson plans. So there's a lot that comes into play with scheduling that initial time of teaching, because we're all doing it at the same time, hopefully, because it's the beginning of the year and we want to start off with those expectations really solid for our students. So that's something that as a staff and as a team, you need to develop that schedule for. So that's a big part of it. Then we're going to start to see that, there are natural times within our year where we have some natural behavior instances that start occurring, and it might be the same thing in the same location. We're seeing a ton of kids doing this. I was in a school district once where there was this hot sauce competition that happened. I'm not sure if you were there that year. But there was a group of, I believe it was 4th graders, who decided they were going to have a hot sauce competition. There wasn't a lot of staff watching what was happening at lunch or how much hot sauce was going on to their food. So they were dumping the hot sauce on their food, and then what ended up happening was every single day after lunch, these kids were throwing up. So the bathroom was just demolished, and then they were all going home, and they were like, oh my gosh, is there food poisoning that year? Oh, it might have been the year before. It was just like mass chaos. Is there food poisoning? Is there something wrong? They were calling Chartwell's, they were calling all these places. What is happening? The kids are getting sick. Well, finally, the funniest and most disgusting, so I'm sorry, the janitor went up and goes, guys, this is hot sauce. He was the identifier of what it was, and so then they started watching and they saw it happening. The kids were doing this hot sauce competition, who could get after lunch without throwing up and being sent home with like the winner. So natural times do some reteaching around what's an appropriate amount of hot sauce to use, right? So these types of things will bubble up. In the meantime, a lot of schools will go with something like a monthly theme, where they'll start talking about this characteristic this year or this month, and not this year, every year. And then oftentimes you'll find that SEL characteristic that you're talking about, you can combine some of those things together. One of our schools is doing the 7 principles with Quanta, and they are taking that and intertwining it with their PBIS expectations and talking about what that looks like. So here's this characteristic that you have of like trustworthiness, and how do we couple that together with respect this month, and how can we put these two together to talk about what it looks like in these areas of our school or in our lives in general. So lots of cool things that you can do there. Definitely, as we've talked about after breaks, there are some habits that are formed. Our kids get back into a routine of doing whatever it is that they did before. They come back to school and we bring it with them, right? So I'm used to running out of the room whenever I want. I'm used to eating whenever I want. I'm used to throwing things across the room when I want. And we have to, slowly get back to, okay, but in this space, here's the expectation, and this is how we touch on that. If you have new people joining, be it staff or students or families that are coming in, and you have quite a few, it could just be one, because sometimes one is all it takes, to where we see a behavior start to kind of go into a direction that is not what we expect. We want to make sure that we're doing some reteaching during that time, either staff or students, because we want to make sure everyone's on the same page in terms of what our expectations are. So we're modeling those things. Prior to any kind of event, if you're going off-site, on-site, anywhere where you're doing something different and out of the norm, it is a great time to reteach the expectation of what to do in that setting. So if we're taking on a field trip, what's our expectation for who we are? What are Crusaders, and what does that look like on this field trip? It's a great time to do that. And then again, whenever your data or the janitor suggests that you need to have a refresher on something, we make sure that we follow what the data is telling us. So if we do see that there is influx of 4th graders needing to go home after lunch every day because they've decided to partake in some sort of competition, we want to make sure we're reteaching those types of things as well. And it could be anywhere in the building. You sometimes will find that bathroom time is becoming messy or loud, and that might just be a time to naturally reteach what expectations are for the bathroom. So this is an activity we were going to do, but what I'm going to have you do is not do it, because we want to give you a little bit of a break at the end of listening to us talk and having you go through all the things to think about, because I think you guys have thought about and done a lot of really hard work this morning. One of the things we do want to point out, though, is that there are multiple ways for you to actually start looking at that initial weaving of your school-wide expectations and lessons into your school day, into your parents, so that they can take it home. So a lot of times people will use something in-house if you have TVs, or if you have any kind of projection that you're using where you can make videos that you can show the students. We would never suggest that initial teaching happens in that way. Initial teaching should happen in the location so that they can see it firsthand. There's lots and lots of research to show that in the location is what students need. However, with those reteachings, refreshers, anytime that you're getting into like a monthly theme, having a video that the kids can engage in is really helpful. Kids like technology, so fun videos are always a blast. Boot camp during school, I know there's a school down south, not that far, but like southern Indiana, they do 6 weeks of just character, SEL, and PBIS work. For the first 6 weeks of school, they don't do content. And a lot of that is to do like a boot camp for their kids, and what they find is they actually finish the full grade level content and then some, because their kids are so ingrained in what this is who we are and this is what we do. So super cool. Morning announcements are great, so having those set up. I was with a principal once who got on and would like sing a song. He was so funny. He sang songs to the kids, but then also reminded them of expectations at the same time. He sometimes would pick random things to focus in on. He sometimes would say like, hey, the expectation I was looking for yesterday that was being met was, and he'd say, here are the kids that I'm drawing in a random drawing to come up and spend time with me. So we talked about love languages. Some of our kids are really going to take the ticket idea. Some of our kids are really going to go for that words of affirmation. A lot of our students, especially at elementary level, they want time. So spending time with you is huge, and it's free, and it's easy, and it's just a matter of giving it to them. You know, so it's very simple. We did a tracker once and gosh, and so many of our elementary students, they just wanted time. Principal for a day, teacher for an hour, whatever. They love that. So having a motto or a song, you'll find that that's really cool. We sent out a PBIS newsletter just recently. If you want to get it, feel free. I can hook you up with it in the break. But we had a teacher or a principal who did school-wide songs that she had taught with her students, and it was so great. And then they did a positive affirmation talk after that, which was really cool too. So different things like that are fun. And then any other ideas that you might have around how to make it exciting, just make it exciting for your kids. They want to be engaged. If they just have you say, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, it's going to be not as exciting for them to follow those rules. So try to keep them engaged, try to make it fun, try to shake things up on them. It'll really help to keep that positive energy and culture moving forward. So teaching the lessons, this is the end of the year motto, right? So like I told them they're just so quiet and came, but I told them that the glue sticks were lip balm because that's how I got to where I needed to be. Sometimes that's how we feel, right? We just need to be quiet here. Try this. So let's not get there.
It's okay to do that.
Adjust. I wasn't trying to plant ideas. So what we want to do is make sure we just are simply defining what we want. We're modeling it for them. If we aren't modeling that behavior, they will not do the behavior we're expecting of them. So if we say this is the behavior that's expected and we do the opposite, expect them to do the opposite. That actions are louder than words concept. We need to actually engage in that behavior as well. We tell our kids not to be rude to each other, but if we're being rude to other staff members, they see it. Kids are so observant. It's actually sometimes at home, like I'm thinking personally, it's quite annoying. Well, you do that to dad. So we want to make sure we're simply defining, we're modeling, we're in that setting again. That's really big for them to practice in the setting. We want to make sure we acknowledge them, like, oh my gosh, make it a big deal when they do even the simplest of things sometimes. For some of these kids, that's going to make the biggest difference. Even if it's not me that's being recognized, to see someone else get recognized, I'm going to be excited about that. And some of you have experience with that already, so I know preach to the choir. And then we want to make sure we just adjust for audience, so make sure we know who our students are, make sure that we're thinking of who they are, what they bring into the classroom, honor them as individuals, honor the culture they come from. Do not ask them to be somebody other than who they are, and teach them those expectations that are in this setting while allowing them to be themselves, which is, it can be tricky, and some of that is self-reflection, because we do carry our own values and norms, and sometimes those can get in the way of their values and norms. So we want to make sure that we're honoring all of it. So that's the big piece. These are just some examples of some themes that have come up in other places so that you can see it. You have access to the PowerPoint, so you can play around with that. You should, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So these are just some ideas that have come up. So we have a couple minutes. Actually, let's not do groups. Let's just do it out loud. So when we think about common times that even right now, when you think back on previous years, are there common times where you see a need for reteaching? So we know we do it at the beginning of the year. We have to teach these expectations or else they're just not going to do what's expected right off the bat, right? And we know they'll practice it and then it will become a habit. We don't want that. throughout the year that you can think of, even right now, within your context, I'm not speaking general, but within your context, that you feel would be natural times for reteaching in a calendar. And I say this as a group for us to talk about it, because the teaching calendar and schedule has to be developed, and your team here would be the one to do it. So if you have your leadership team working on that, they can have your feedback as to when you're seeing natural times for a need for reteaching. Yeah, sir.
Beginning of the new trimester.
Beginning of the new trimester, yeah. I don't know if anyone's taking it. Okay, thanks.
I feel like not right before a larger break, but before Christmas break when people get screwed.
Yeah, oh, for sure. There's actually, there's a lot of research to show that before a break, a lot of our students get anxiety. This is a safe place for them. You know, they know they're trusted adults, they know what's going to happen, and when they know that break is coming where they don't have you and they don't have this safe space for themselves, it can cause them serious, and it's getting into some of those mental health supports that need to be put in place, but a lot of times it's that reteaching and reminder of, remember, we're crusaders, and this is what we are, right? Great point.
At holidays, like Halloween and a party.
You have to be, why would you be sad?
I think we often use it as an excuse for chaos.
Yeah.
We're like, so it's fine at a holiday, we can let them be crazy, but then we're all pulling our hair out, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And we're also showing them that it's okay when there's a special thing happening to disregard expectations, right? We want to make sure that they know that in every setting. So they go out into the community and they will be your neighbors one day. So let's make sure that they know come Halloween, you're not allowed to come to my house and smash my pumpkin, right? So let's make sure that we have the expectations continuing even during those times of high, celebration? I don't even know what to call it, chaos.
That was more like field trip.
Yeah. Yep, field trips and assembly. Catholic Schools Week, yeah. Thursdays and Fridays, just in general, we're pattern.
When they're out of uniform, Spirit Week.
Spirit Week out of uniform? Yeah, we get a different character when we can do that. Like you guys are like, oh my gosh, every day. And that's absolutely normal across the board. This is what happens in every school. You'll find, but knowing your days, so if Thursdays and Fridays tend to be a little bit higher for you, that's something to be aware of. So we reteach regularly. So maybe every Thursday and Friday we make it it's a set thing, or maybe just Thursday, and then we acknowledge the poo out of them. You know, we're doing the right thing. We're giving all the tickets. Thank you. Making sure. The big thing with those tickets and acknowledgments is making sure it's specific. So make sure when you hand them a ticket, you're not just like, good job. Say, thank you for being respectful by, and whatever it is that they did. Make sure it's super specific. We call it the SPF here, the specific positive feedback. So it's on your sunscreen, SPF. So make sure that you're just super specific, or else that ticket doesn't mean anything. They're like, I did something. They can't repeat it if they don't know.
And we talked about, too, not just laying it on their desk, but actually saying it to them.
Yeah.
Because we don't always read it then, like, I'm just excited I got one, throw it in, and people, why'd you get it? I don't know.
Yeah. It's one of the most common things. So we do a walkthrough within schools. One of the most common things that we find is students don't know why they got the ticket or why they got acknowledged for whatever they got acknowledged for. They're like, I don't know, I think I did something good. I think you did too. Yeah.
Just a question about tickets. So I go, kindergarten all the way to 6th grade.
Sure.
And with some classes I found it was better to wait until the end and say all right, now these 3 people got tickets because, and with some classes it works better. Is there a way that it's better? Some classes work better with immediate, and is there an age where it breaks down, or is there a general way that it's better?
Yeah, so research would always suggest immediate. And that would just always be to say thank you so much, because in that moment there's that immediate. It also will encourage kind of I saw my neighbor get this, so then in that immediate moment I'm also going to, so you might find it increase, you might. Again, it's about what is going to work for your kids, so you have to think about it that way. There are some where it maybe got competitive. We've seen some classes where that's happened, and they've moved towards more of class acknowledgement systems and kind of stepped back a little bit from the individual. I would never step back fully from individual. I think it's very important, and you kind of have to gauge your class. Research says immediate. And that's really all that we can say. You have to judge your context to see what's going to work for you, but
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard to like stop in the middle of a chapter and be like, and, you know, but on the other hand, yeah.
Well, and sometimes it's a whimper. You know, if you're the one reading, then, you know, I would wait, obviously, because if you're in the midst of, like, if you read aloud or something, yeah, I would wait. And then do it again. Hey, thank you so much for being attentive to my reading. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being excited about it or whatever.
I was going to say, because I know that our classes function a little similarly. After, like, an activity or a song, I might do it because I can't stop in the middle of it. You know.
Right, yeah.
Or if it makes sense, I'll do them all again, kind of like you did. You know. But, like, if it's like, okay, we're going from this song, and now we're going to move on to, like, everyone's turning a page, and while they're doing that, like, hey, by the way, I saw blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it has to work for you. So, like, what's your content?
Spanish.
Yeah. Yay, I taught Spanish in high school.
Fun.
So, yeah, sorry. So, obviously, like, if it's not going to work with the activity, you're doing it right away, then do it when it does make sense. I would do it as immediately following as you could, just because that's what the research has suggested is the best for your students. If you're finding that there's any kind of problematic situation happening, Emily is actually going to be our classroom coach, so generally she can come in and observe and just say, this is probably what's happening, so she can kind of get a feel for what's going on, because sometimes you're not seeing what's happening in the other period. Sometimes, all the time. You say that all the time.
Yeah, I just echo what Amy said about, we want it to work for us as the adults, but we also want to make sure it works for the students too, right? So if we know we have a student that is receiving some tier 2 or some tier 3 support, and we want that positive behavior to occur again, then we really want to make sure that we're stopping in that moment. So the likelihood of that behavior to occur again will happen.
Yeah.
I've done two where I've handed them a ticket and said, thank you so much for using a voice level 0. When I'll fill it out at the end, or like, and they will bring it back up to you to fill it out. So that helps remembering, and because it is hard, right? You have to do it all the time.
It is. Yeah, I get that. Any other thoughts on patterns or anything that you want to bring up that your leadership team can take back and talk about and bring back to you?
Again, if you're interested, it's on our committee sheet. So please feel free if you would like to be on that committee to put your name on there.
So Emily, I'm just going to go into it. That's okay. Emily put this in and was going to talk a little bit about CHAMPS. So CHAMPS is what we started talking about. There is conversation about doing this with everybody to make sure everybody's in. If by chance, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm saying the same alliteration and my mouth is struggling. We have some actual training sessions already set up for this year. So if you're interested, you can talk to Stephanie and see if that's something you'd be able to do. It's always nice to have a leader or two that's willing to come try it out. I know you have a couple people here already trained, so that's fantastic. Other than that, we will plan on providing that training for you all. And then we also have supporting PBIS in the classroom. Generally, we would say the administrator and leadership team. That would be a really nice training for you guys. And it really gets into how to provide support for those classroom structures. So lots of different opportunities. Everything's online, and you can always just email one of us because we can send you the links too. I know sometimes searching for it is a challenge. So we're happy to help you with it. We were going to do a whip around, and we have no minutes left because it's lunchtime. So we're going to not do a whip around. That's usually where you just say one word about what's happened today and how you feel about it, and that's a strategy you can use in your classroom, but we're not going to do it, and we love you, Nicole.
I have lunch out, so go use the bathroom if you need to. Take a little walk, and then lunch will be out. We are having grilled chicken with salad, or you can put it in a wrap, or there's chicken salad on something roll. So lots of things to choose from, and there's food there. Grab some lunch. Give me just a moment to get out here.
Or I might crash.
All right. Yeah. I don't know who that's right now. That I don't know.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
And it erases that really well to actually get rid of it 2 years consecutively. I think we have options of doing 4 by 10.
especially since we're in the process of